This is one of my family's favorite soups. You're gonna need a pound of pork sausage. You can choose spicy or regular. We prefer regular. And a pound of ground turkey. And I'm just gonna use a knife to cut this open. Just gonna go right down the middle and put it in the crock pot. And then this one's not quite thawed out yet, so I'm gonna cut the end off and just slide it out. Usually I'll cut this down the middle the same way, but since we went shopping last night, it wasn't quite thawed out all the way. But that's the beginning, and you're just gonna throw the crock pot on low or high, depending on if you're coming or going. This one does need a little more, I suppose, babysitting, because you're gonna wanna cook the meat first and then add all the things, and you're gonna need time for some coleslaw to cook down. But I'm gonna throw this on high. The meat should be done in a couple hours, and I'll come back and show you what to do with it. Okay, the meat is done, so we're gonna break it up. You can do this with the little like meat chopper tool like I have here. You can do it with some forks. It doesn't really matter how you do it. You just want to break it up so that you're not serving big rolls of meat. I should also note I didn't drain any of the liquid from the meats off of that because it's a soup, so we're gonna want that there. So the first thing I'm going to add to this is 2 cups. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, 2 cups of tomato juice. So I make this recipe about once every 7 weeks because I have a 7-week meal rotation because I like variety, but I also like a plan. So I don't make it super frequently. So I was finding that buying tomato juice in large containers with a screw-on lid, by the time I'd get back to making this again, it would have molded. So I went to buying it in sets of these little 5.5 ounce cans, and 3 of these is just about the perfect amount, and then they don't mold. Okay. 1 can of diced tomatoes. I'm gonna put my spices in before anything else because it's easier to stir in at this point before you add the bulkier things like the vegetables and other things that this calls for. So 1 teaspoon of ginger, which I am almost out of. Yep, that's pretty much a teaspoon right there, so that's perfect. 2 teaspoons of chili powder, which I think I just dumped in there pretty much all at once. There we go. A teaspoon of salt. And remember, you want real salt, either sea salt, Celtic salt, or Redmond's real salt, not table salt. That's not healthy for you. And then a half a teaspoon, and I'm just gonna eyeball it rather than pull out my half teaspoon measuring spoon. A half a teaspoon of Payeur to sweeten it without using sugar. And this just gives it like the flavor a really good balance instead of it getting too salty. Because then you're also going to add a 1/4 cup of liquid aminos, which is a healthy replacement for soy sauce. And it also calls for a 1.5 cups of half and half. And I don't always add the full 1.5 cups. I kind of just watch how liquidy each batch is becoming and call it on that. For your vegetables, this calls for peas, onions, and half a head of cabbage. So I'm just going to dump in a, let's see how big is this, 12-ounce bag of frozen peas, because they will cook through in there. And then anytime a soup calls for cabbage, I do it the lazy way and buy a bag of coleslaw, and that cooks down in there. I should have stirred this before adding the coleslaw, because that's why I had added the seasonings first, but you know, I forgot. So I'm gonna stir this in the best I can at this point. This also calls for an onion, which you could chop fresh or use frozen. I forgot to buy them this week when I went grocery shopping, so I don't have one, but this soup is pretty flexible in that you can be missing something like that and do okay. That is all stirred together. You'll let that cook down for another hour or two on high, and then you're good to go. You can also just make all this directly on the stove. The exact way we did it here in the crock pot, you would just cook up the meat right away on the stove and then add everything else to it and let it boil for 5 to 10 minutes, monitoring the coleslaw because it'll cook down pretty quickly when you've got it hot on the stove like that. So you can either do it the quick way on the stove or you can do it the all day way in the crock pot.